I'm going to read you guys a little disclaimer. This webinar is being recorded. By participating in this webinar, you agree that Angelique Mizell Robbins has all rights to this recording, and you grant her permission to use your image in any written or spoken comments you choose to offer during the course of the webinar in any matter she chooses. So I am going to send you guys a recording of this, a link to this video when we're finished, so that because a lot will be covered. So back to my story. When I was 19, I had a near-death experience, and while I was overdosing, I felt my soul being pulled out through the back of my head, right here at the nape of my neck, and I kept pulling it back in. It's like I knew if I went out all the way that I would be gone. And I started praying for, my life to be spared. And I ended up in this, it's kind of hard to describe, but it was just an in-between type of space where I came in contact with this massive energy. And it was a very loving energy, but not loving in the way that we usually think of loving. It was intimidating loving, like so powerful and so enormous. Like you can't even think of it in size necessarily because it was energy. So I called it God. I was like, oh, this is God. And the energy replied back to me, a better name is Geschichte. And at the time, I had no idea what that meant. I learned later from my father, who's a theologian, that it means history or story in German. And he said in the study of theology that it's actually a word that's used to describe the holy history, which is, I just found that fascinating. And I didn't even know that until, 20 years or close to 20 years after it had happened to me. And so in this in-between space, I started having this telepathic communication with this energy, and started to, and what happens in telepathic communication is it's really fast. So it's not like there's not this time lapse in between saying something. It's like you have a thought and that thought is just transmitted or received. So I was receiving essentially thought energy, or just some type of fullness of an energy, which had a thought element to it, but also an experience element to it. So it was like when I was receiving the information, I was receiving the experience of the information, not just like words coming in, and our ears, the way that we receive information is different. And so this communication began about the sacredness of life, the fact that life is a gift, the fact that I had, not understood that life was a gift and that I was throwing it away in this experience, and so much more. And so I really, in that experience, felt so much shame that I completely missed the point of life. And that I had taken my own life for granted and been so absorbed in my pain that I wasn't experiencing the beauty. And so this is all happening at a very deep level. It's very hard to describe, but I really didn't want to die. And And I was really comprehending the value of my life, and I was really comprehending the people that loved me, and which I thought that people didn't love me at that time. And so I was shown my funeral also. And there were so many people there, and so many people that were, very just distraught that I was gone. And this entire experience of this communication that was happening, it changed me to my core. It changed my outlook on everything. And eventually I was so weak that I couldn't continue pulling myself back in, because physically I was still trying to pull myself back in while I was having this entire experience. And so I said, all right. And it had been a few hours of communication by this point. So I said, okay, I can't do this anymore. If I'm meant to die, I'll die. If I'm meant to live, then whatever is asked of me, I will do. And with that, I passed out and woke up sometime later. And from that moment forward, I started having very, very interesting experiences. And first of all, I learned over a period of time that energy that I was communicating with, that energy that saved my life, is the angelic realm. And that angelic realm started working with me from that moment forward. And I started having really strange experiences. Like every day at noon for about a year, I'm an artist. And at the time I was the manager of a frame shop. And so I framed artwork, and I would feel like I was going to pass out in the middle of the day. And prior to this, I was an insomniac. So passing out in the middle of the day was never, ever a thing. Passing out at night wasn't even a thing. So every day at about noon, somewhere around that in the middle of the day, I would become so exhausted and like I couldn't keep my eyes open. And I would crawl up on the table where I would do framing and pass out. And while I was passed out, I couldn't move my body at all, but I could hear people around me, even though nobody was in the store. And this happened literally every single day for a year. That was one of the weird things that happened. I started being able to see things that I couldn't see before. I started being able to hear things that I couldn't hear before. I started being able to really interact with people's energy in a way that I couldn't before. I could tell, I started being able to tell when someone was lying to me. And it was like I could feel the real energy coming from them, and then I could feel the false energy. And they were like, when they were lying, it was like two separate people. And a lot of times they didn't know they were lying. They're just lying to themselves, right? So I was also led to a woman who was both a Native American shaman and a psychologist who had created her own form of therapy that worked with people in a subconscious state. Not hypnotherapy. It was very different than that. It was not making a suggestion to the person. It was actually a communication system with their soul. And I studied with her for about 13 years. And my ability to interact with people in a very unique way just increased exponentially through this time period. Then in 2012, I had another near-death experience where I got really, really sick. And after that near-death experience, the the energy that I had been working with all that time moved into my body in a very palpable way one night when I was hanging out with a group of friends, and in which some of you know Keith was one of them. And we were just sitting around talking, and I don't even remember what we were talking about, but something, some type of deep conversation was happening. And there was this moment where none of us really knew an answer. And I felt that same energy that I had been working with all these years and that had saved my life that night when I overdosed enter my body and start speaking to the people that I was around. And that started these kind of teachings, the sessions that I do one-on-one, just the different kind of work that I do today. Really started that day when Geschichte and I merged in the same body and started teaching and helping people. So that is how I came to this place where I can actually talk to you about this kind of thing. The other thing that happened to me, which was very interesting, this happened to me when I was 21. So 2 years after the near-death experience, I had one night I was hanging out with some friends, and I went to the bathroom, and while I was sitting on the toilet, it was like I felt my head open, and I was like flooded, and when I say flooded, I mean flooded. Like, it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain how energy can make you feel heavy, but I was flooded with an energy of some kind that made me feel like I was full of bricks. It made me feel so heavy that I couldn't get off the toilet. And finally, one of my friends came up there and was like, "Hey, are you okay?" But what I was flooded with, which was immediate in that moment, was memories, a specific type of very horrific memories. And they were received as mine. Like some part of me woke up and remembered something. And these memories, I'm not going to go into what these memories were because that's a whole nother story. But these memories were of someone very important to me in my life that had abused me, and I had not remembered it. And the interesting thing is that when you think about a memory in this way, number one, you have to think that there are certain memories, and you guys can relate to this if you think about it, where it's like you remember a feeling. These happen especially when you're really young, but you don't know whose face is attached to it or anything. Like, you can't see it in the way that you can see a memory like from when you're older. So it was like I was flooded with these knowings that this specific thing happened to me. And over a period of 3 years, I had to process through these memories until I came to a place of forgiveness. When I came to that place of forgiveness where it was actually genuine, it was like I was light again. I was free again. And upon that, I understood what had happened to me. And the reason I understood what had happened to me is because I had this woman that I studied with for 13 years had taken me into a regression state to actually uncover the memories. And I had them written down and everything, times, dates, all of this stuff. And when I looked at what they were, when I fully came to, they didn't match my life. They were a couple years off of things that actually happened in my life. So I understood in that experience that they weren't mine. The memories weren't mine. What was interesting about that is that right before I was flooded with that, with those memories, I had been seeing what most people would call a ghost of a girl who someone else I was close to had actually murdered. I did not know that at the time. I had no idea about that. But I was seeing her, and in seeing her, I asked her, "How can I help you?" And what ended up happening is I had absorbed her memories, healed them, and then I was free of her, and I understood the whole thing that had unfolded. I tell you that story because that is the beginning of me interacting with what I'm calling attachments. So I'm not talking to you from only a practitioner who's dealt with attachments. I'm also talking to you as someone who has experienced attachments myself and has actually exercised them myself. So with that, I'm going to sing the song that Geschichte taught me when I was in my 20s. And after I'm done singing, I will have merged, and it will be me and Geschichte speaking to you guys for the rest of the webinar. So just close your eyes and relax. Enjoy the song. Oh, say Savanata. Oh, say Savanata. Ooh, ooh, hey. Come, second. Come, second. Ooh, say no. Ooh, for say say come, second. Hey, for not hey, for not he come forte. Come forte. He come forte. Right. So, attachments. What we have found in working with them is that they come from a myriad of different places, and the most essential thing to understand is that they are energy. And the other most important thing to understand is that humans are also energy. So we like to think of ourselves like we're just these physical beings running around, but ultimately we're energy first and foremost. And in addition to being energy, we are creative energy, meaning we're always creating. So in this world, we're taught to pay attention to that which is physical. And we're even taught that paying attention to that which isn't physical is silly. It's mocked. It's considered woo-woo. And that's intentional, because if our attention is only on that which is physical, then we're actually ignoring that which isn't and avoiding that which isn't. And that leads into exactly how all of these attachment or parasitic energies can exist in the first place. When you consider that human beings are made up of a lot of different things, okay, so we teach in the form of something called 8 fields of human existence. And the physical field, that which we can touch, is in the very last field. It's in field 8. So physical field is that which we can interact with that has form. Before that is the field of perception, or some people call it the ego, right? So that aspect of self that is a projection more than anything else. It's an idea of who we are, what we want, why we're important, all of those kinds of things. And within that field, even that field, that field of perception can have many different aspects within it. And in fact, a lot of attachments come through that field or are created in that field. Then there is the mental and emotional fields, which can also have attachments because those fields are also energetic fields. The emotional field is a field of emotion that's specific to the individual and also shared by all humans. And then there's the thought field or the mental field, also shared by all humans and specific to an individual. Then there's the communication field, which is about electricity, magnetism, and how everything in life communicates with each other, like a cosmic web kind of thing. And it exists as broad as you can think and then as small as you can think, so your organs communicating with each other and that sort of thing. And then in the field above that is a field that's specific to this timeline or this incarnation of Earth. And that can actually include, humans are talking about it more now, but it's even this part is considered taboo to talk about, the fact that these lifespans are at the most 100-something years and we're supposed to think that's it, but in fact we're energy, so we're coming into form over and over and over again. So just within one incarnation of Earth are multiple incarnations of our energy. Then there's the field where there's more than just this incarnation of Earth, but many incarnations of many Earths and other lives elsewhere, who knows where. And those are all stored within our memory bank, if you want to call it that, as well. And then there's the field of everything, all existence ever. And that's field 1. And every bit of that is within each one of us. So when we're told to pay attention to one field, a field of form, when the majority of us actually has nothing to do with form, we're going to miss a lot. And we're going to make it to where that which is important isn't important. And if we're not aware of the energy that we are on this, vast scale, then how are we supposed to have any kind of authority with ourselves and the world around us? And if we look at the state of the world right now, what we can clearly see is that that's exactly the problem we have. We don't have significant authority with ourselves and with our relationship to the rest of the world. And by authority, we don't mean like a dominion aspect or a control aspect, but authority in the sense of I am accountable for myself. I am accountable for my life. I am accountable for how I interact with my life. And I am accountable for how I interact with others. And through that accountability, I have authority. And that's the doorway that's really important, is this doorway of accountability. Because the energy that is showing up as attachments, the main doorway that it comes through is the lack of accountability. The lack of accountability, which translates into pain. Okay, so if you look at pain from an energetic standpoint, pain is something that's going to be experienced, but it's also something that's meant to be going through an alchemical process, meaning it's not meant to get stuck. And when we look at nature, we see a good example of how pain doesn't get stuck in nature. Nature is really good at alchemizing pain. And so nature has a better flow than humanity does. Humanity has all of this complexity, just thinking about it in terms of the 8 fields that we just described, and very, very limited ability to actually interact with that complexity. So some might call this spiritual laziness, but it's more than just a laziness, because it's an ignorance in general and a denial in general. And what happens is, when pain occurs, and you have to really broaden your mind to think about this, because pain, if we're thinking about it all the way up to field 1, so pain moving through all of these different fields, or pain existing in all of these different fields, pain which is not alchemized, or pain which is not transformed, is stagnant, right? And energetically speaking, when you have stagnant energy to that degree that makes its way into lives over and over and over again through lineage, through an emotional field, through a thought field, through all of these things that humanity shares, then what's happening in a creative sense? The energy of pain grows. And it grows individually, and it grows on a mass level or a collective level, right? And then when you add into that humanity is creative, humanity is literally creative energy, meaning humanity, not only can humanity create, things, but humanity can create energies through these different processes. Humanity can create energies through thoughts, through beliefs, through repetition, through speaking, through intention, through interaction. And none of that is even really considering the physical aspect. That's all humanity can create without touching anything. So the subject of accountability is, what is humanity creating? Or more personally, what am I creating? And this is an important question, because when we are in the midst of creating energy, we are actually, it's like, it's a sympathetic resonance to other created energies. So the topic of where did it come from is almost irrelevant, but the topic of does it exist is more relevant. And if it exists, what does it resonate with? So when the energy of pain of a specific kind is very strong, it's going to resonate with other energy that is within that frequency set, which creates connection. So it's not even necessarily doorways, it's literal connection. So let's say that there are actual practices on this earth right now where people will abuse someone, either individually or through ritual, specifically to fragment that individual. So that creates literally a fragmentation, which occurs definitely in field 7, that field of perception. So that's how you can get like multiple personalities and that kind of thing. But creates fragmentation of the spirit also. And in that fragmentation is pain that exists in multiple dimensions. And through that experience of pain and fragmentation, there's a lot of resonance that can go on with other like energies. So whether you want to call that demons or just energies of greed or energies of selfishness or energies of abuse and trauma, or it doesn't really matter what they're called. The fact is that they are specific energies that resonate with each other. And in the resonance, they have connection. This is why the teachings of, if you just say a Bible verse, if you just accept Jesus into your heart, if you just think positive thoughts, that's why those teachings are selling everyone very, very short of what's actually occurring. Because in the resonance, the connection is. So you can't cut a cord. You can't cut a cord of resonance. Resonance is. And this is where the accountability comes in. If one does not alchemize their own pain, if one does not alchemize their own suffering, then the resonance is, which means the doorway exists or the connection exists. Are you guys following this so far? Is this making sense? So, one of the main things that we teach is what we call either emotional alchemy or energetic alchemy. It doesn't really matter. And we prefer energetic alchemy at this point because there are other people doing emotional alchemy, and that's not what we're doing in regard to what these other people are doing. What we're doing is literally transforming the energy itself through a specific process. And most people hear that concept of transforming energy or transforming emotions or something like that and go, oh, who really needs that? It's not really that important. But the thing is, it's one of the most important things that exist in this world. Because if one doesn't know how to transform their own pain energetically, then they are stagnant in resonating with more of that kind of energy. So when you think about people who feel like their entire lives are just total crap and they never seem to get out of the hole and that kind of thing, this is exactly what we're talking about. And it's through the non-transformed energy that there is resonance, which means that through transforming one's own energies that are not in their optimal state or their mature state, through transforming those, one can become more and more integrated and cohesive, creating a wholeness. And in a wholeness, one is not going to resonate with those energies. That connection will not be there. And even if it does exist, one can transform that energy. So, aren't words energies? This was always my understanding with reciting Bible verses. Yes, but how many people recite Bible verses with the correct energy? Many people recite Bible verses with superiority. So the words are always pointing to an energy. So when we were speaking of someone's energy saying a thing and their mouth saying something different and that being a lie, that's what people do with Bible verses. The words coming out of the mouth are the verse. The energy coming forth is not what the words are meant to intend or emit. How many people that speak the words of Jesus actually emit what Jesus emitted? And what would people have to understand in order to emit the energy that Jesus emitted? They would actually have to understand him energetically to be able to emit that same energy. Right? And let's just look at that, just that little thing just for a second. How many people read the Bible and actually understand the context with which all of that was occurring? How many people read the Bible and actually understand what Jesus was saying in the small parts of him actually saying something? And ultimately, the most important thing is that whatever words are leaving your mouth are completely aligned with what you mean. Okay, so alignment is also a way to become whole. And another way to say alignment is honesty. So how many people are really able to allow the words that come out of their mouth to truly match whatever it is that they're emitting? And when you really start to evaluate this within yourself, you'll see that they often don't match. And when they don't match, you know what's happening? You know what it's showing you? Fragmentation. So two of the main things that will prevent attachments and keep one from, how do we say this? Whatever's going on inside can either be moved into more and more of a state of healing or moved more and more into a state of aggravation when you're talking about something that is painful. If one is honest, it is going to move that individual more and more toward healing. One of the main problems that we see is that people are too afraid to be honest, not only just with other people, but with themselves. So even if we're having a conversation with them and we know that they're not being honest with themselves, because it's very clear, if they are not able to even come to terms with the fact that whatever it is they're allowing to come out of their mouth doesn't match how they actually feel, it's impossible for them to actually transmute pain. It's impossible to transform pain. It's impossible to alchemize any kind of pain. And let's look into that. What happens at that place when you're honest with yourselves about something that is painful to you? Let's say someone's in a marriage and they're not actually happy within the marriage, but they have this narrative going on that says, oh, but I'm supposed to be happy in the marriage, and I made a vow, so I have to stick with the vow, and therefore basically it's off limits for me to admit that I'm unhappy in the marriage because of all of this over here. What does that mean? It means that no action will ever be taken in one way or another to come to a place where the individual is genuinely happy or content within the relationship. Definitely within the relationship, because if one can't admit that they're unhappy within the relationship and communicate that to the other individual to see if the other individual actually gives two craps about correcting whatever it is, then it's definitely never going to be happier. But also in that communication, if the other person basically doesn't care if they're happy or not, and if what they're doing is causing pain, then the individual who's communicating can't even break up with them. So what does that mean? It's stagnant. That's stagnant pain. And someone who's in an unhappy marriage who can't communicate that, there's nothing that they can do, no matter what story they tell themselves, that's going to make that relationship better, because they can't even be honest with themselves in the first place. And the honesty is the first step of correcting what needs corrected. So you can apply that to anything. You can apply that level of dishonesty to anything. But what we're trying to show you with it is that it creates pain that builds upon itself. And as the pain builds, and then there's the layer of denial on top of that pain. As that pain builds and then the denial builds, it actually grows. And every experience where there's more disappointment or more feelings of not being important to someone or any of those things just feeds this wound over here that's not getting tended to, and it grows and grows and grows and grows. And that's the curse of dishonesty. And the curse of dishonesty is a doorway into attachments. Okay? So another way to think about that is that the curse of dishonesty could also be known as the curse of secrets. Right? Because if one is dishonest with themselves, what does one have? Secrets. And the energy of secrets are also very, very detrimental. So in the beginning, when we're speaking of this telepathic communication that was occurring in the near-death experience, the thing to understand that's really beautiful in that kind of communication is transparency. And in transparency, there is genuine connection. And in genuine connection and genuine transparency, there is absolute choice. In the absence of that, so in the other side of that, which is the dishonesty, the secrets, there is not choice. There is default. And what happens in that energy is you become a slave or a victim to the energies that you've generated through avoidance and denial. And those act like a magnet or an amplifier or a connector to other energies of that same kind. So at this point, do you guys have any questions? Are you staying with us? Are we losing you? Yes, Pamela. You're on mute.
Okay, so when I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings, that's really being dishonest with them. I just have to find a nice way to say it.
Yep.
Okay.
That's a good question, because that is one of the main reasons people are dishonest with each other, is not wanting to hurt each other's feelings. But when you think about it, when you think about it, the energy of honesty is a gift. If someone is honest with you, it means they care enough about you to strengthen, to offer a possibility of strengthening the relationship that you have with them, right?
I never thought about it in that context. That's very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Angel, this is Cecilia.
Hi,
I like what you said about it's not a choice, it becomes a
default.
A default. Because here's how I understand that. If I've gotten used to hiding a particular thing, but now that's no longer, if it becomes, it doesn't transmute, it's there, it is, but it's no longer a choice I'm making, it is made.
Yeah.
The longer I stay with it, it is the default to the initial choice to hide it.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it also generates a specific kind of energy. So you're right. At one point in time, it definitely was a choice, and then often it's just forgotten, right? So once a choice is made, it's like, oh no, I made that choice. There's no going back on that.
Mm-hmm.
And after that occurs, then it's generating its own energy, its own outcome.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that is.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Angel, I have a question, Amanda.
Yes.
If you're honest, say in inverted commas, and you say something, how much does your energy at that time influence the honesty? Like, you feel like you're being honest, but how can you be sure that's coming from a pure place, or I'm not quite sure what the word is.
Well, you might not be able to at that moment. And especially when, if you've lived a life of not being forthcoming or not being honest, and then you start trying to be honest, that's certainly the struggle that's going to occur for a little while. But think of it like a process that as you train yourselves to be honest with yourself and with others, and always definitely do your best to be honest in a loving way, meaning find the space within you that cares before you're delivering whatever it is you're delivering. But also realize honest doesn't necessarily mean right. And that's really important to comprehend. You can be honest about the way something makes you feel, or, your take on a situation or your side of a thing. And maybe you're interpreting it completely inaccurately. That's okay. The practice is to be genuine with self and genuine with others, so that you're not building a life on top of bullshit or relationships on top of nonsense, just to be polite or nice. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
But honesty it's a deep thing, because when you start the process of honesty, then one of the things you're going to move into is honesty about your own intention. And, so many people stop way short of ever looking at that and have a really hard time actually examining what is my intention with this? What do I actually want from this? And am I being manipulative? Is what I'm offering actually because I care about someone, or is it because I want something? So their honesty has levels, but the point is that you can't even get it going. You can't even get yourself into the practice of that type of genuine energy unless you practice it. Honesty is an art, and it's a lost art, the way we see it. It's now been traded for politeness or manipulation or intentional illusion creating. But it's in that expression of honesty where everything is solvable. Everything. We mean that. Everything is solvable within the energy of honesty. And nothing is solvable outside of it.
Angel.
Yes.
Hi. What about when you're dealing with people where, it's interesting you say everything's solvable with honesty. Like, what if you're very honest about your feelings, but you're dealing with certain family members and the only honesty they seem to be able to, espouse, or how can I say, express, is like just anger. So you're able to express yourself, your anger, your sadness, but they can only throw anger at you. And it's funny because, the topic was like attachments. With one of these family members, sometimes I wonder, is something bad attached to her, negative, that she knows nothing but anger and hate towards me. And I see nothing that I've done to her in our lives for me to deserve that. But, I don't know if I'm making myself clear. I struggle with speaking, so.
Well, number one, we would say that even if somebody is angry with you and sharing honesty with you in that way, that's still a gift. And the duty of the person who's receiving somebody else's honesty is to actually evaluate what they're saying and actually integrate the energy of what they're saying, and to hold themselves accountable to, is there anything within me that I can correct in regard to what this individual is telling me or expressing to me? So if we had you and your family member in this in a session, and we were listening to her speak to you and you speak to her, then what we would be listening for is the emission of what's underneath the words. So already just feeling into it, we can feel that there is some kind of woundedness that this person feels, whether or not they've been good at actually communicating that, we're not sure. But when you're in the energy of genuine honesty, it's also on the receiving end. So you receive in the spirit of honesty also. And in the spirit of honesty, you wouldn't be defensive necessarily. You would take in what that person is offering and allow yourself to sink deeper into the energy of what they're offering, even more than the words. Because in the energy, if you feel that someone is hurt, then you might be able to say to them, and instead of going in circles with their words, which is what people end up doing, you could receive the energy of what they're offering and go, I can feel that you're hurt by me. And I really want to understand how I hurt you, because I don't want to hurt you. And right there, you've broken the loop in being able to say it that way. And maybe this person would say back to you, you know, you hurt me with this, and then your behaviors of this are continuing it. And that's what we mean by solvable. When you deeply listen and you deeply look for solutions within what's really there, then you can actually accomplish something that wouldn't be possible through the beating of heads. So you can kind of figure out what's going on with an individual so that you can figure out if that person is important to you, how to correct it. And then if you are able to do that, and then they still can't accept you or receive you, then the next level of honesty in that kind of situation would be, you know, have you been honest with yourself about whether or not you even want to be around me or interact with me? Because as I correct myself, I still don't feel like I'm being received.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see what we're saying about that level of honesty, taking it into that deep nature to where then you are honest with what you're receiving, you correct whatever it is you can correct, and then see how they respond. And if there's
I've done that up to a point, and yeah, it's tough because when they keep bringing up things that there's no way you could say, well, I'm sorry if when you were a child I did this or that, it wasn't meant that way, you know, and they still don't accept it, and they keep bringing up more and more stuff, you know, and throwing it at you. It's like, you know, you can't undo everything that's been done. All you can say is, I'm sorry if I hurt you in any, you know, in some way, but you know, you can't undo the past, you know. And
no,
if
you
they
can't.
choose to
And
still be angry at you, then what can you do, right?
you can just allow them to be angry. That's the best you can do. Right. If you correct yourself, then you can have enough and change your own behaviors, and in whatever way you're being asked to, then you can offer grace to their anger. And you can if you know, the people that take our classes understand that there's actually deeper energetic work you can do. We're not going to fully go into that today because it's more advanced stuff, but you can help alchemize somebody else's pain. It's a very deeply loving thing to do. But it is only possible through this energy of honesty, and it's only possible through genuine love.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Angel.
You're welcome. We saw something from Or shall we no. I know I've struggled with being honest when people ask how you're doing today. A lot of people's natural reaction is to say good, especially to strangers, to people in the workplace. Yeah, that's true. And let's look at that, right? So let's look at honesty from both sides of that. How are you doing today? So examine self when asking the question. Are you just spitting out the words? How are you doing today? Or do you actually care? How are you doing today? Because there's a difference. And that's what we're trying to say in regard to how human beings communicate with each other right now. How are you doing today is actually a deep question, because there's a huge spectrum of what that answer could be if someone's not just expecting some kind of short nicety. But the one who's answering also can feel if someone has asked them in the way of they actually want to know, or if they're just offering a pleasant greeting. And just your English version of the pleasant greeting is actually a deeper question than what anyone actually means it to be. So in the spirit of honesty, if somebody says, how are you doing today? You could ask back, do you actually want to know how I'm doing today? Or is that just a pleasant greeting? Right? So this is why we're saying honesty is an art. Because you're not only requiring honesty of yourself, but you're also discerning the honesty of another. Like, is what someone's saying actually what they mean? And if someone actually means what they're asking you, then you can answer in an honest reply of either truly how you're doing, or it's a complex answer at the moment, and I don't have time to go into it, though I would really love to. So if you're really interested in how I'm doing, perhaps we could go have a drink or have a chat on the phone or something like that. Does that answer your question?
Angel, this is Jill. I talk with Linda about this stuff, but it's so great to hear this all just specifically spoken about and kind of rehashed through all of us in one place. And I wish that something like this was taught to our children in schools as part of health, of having what the importance of communication is. But I know, of course, my dogs would bark. But luckily, we have this to learn or relearn, and we can still teach it to our children.
Absolutely.
But quick example of what you've been discussing. I have been classifying it miscommunication, but I've had a really hard time at work with my task lead. And some things, it's been going on since January. And just in the last month, have we been really working on ironing out our communications. And wow, both of us let one person come into our communications that we shouldn't have. And it messed up a lot. So now we're working on airing things out and rebuilding trust and better communication lines. And this just is a testament of the value and importance of it.
Yeah. And we too wish that the children were taught this. Because imagine how much healthier their world would be if children were taught this. Because children already come in honest.
Wow, that is such a big, profound truth.
And children watch and learn through what they observe more than anything. So the best way to teach the children is to just be it yourselves. So we're reading Annalie's comment. Yes, Annalie. So that's why we were talking about the fields also, because we want you guys to understand that there are attachments that can be passed down through generations, through lineage. And it can happen a multitude of ways, right? So when this is also why we find it to be so very, very important for adults right now to learn how to work with energy. And Mary, we're gonna get you here in a second. We just see that your hand's raised. When adults are whole and able to actually interact with life in a deep and profound way, and able to interact with these different dimensions of life experience, like emotional energy, mental energy, lineage, relationship dynamics, the ability to just be in a place of honesty all the time and live in a way that is very upright and authentic to self, then they are in a place of being able to help their children, because this world is not an easy place to live, especially right now. But when adults do not take any accountability for themselves in how to exist in this world in a more profound way, how to interact with energy, how to interact with their own emotions, how to live from a very centered space of authenticity, then they have no ability to help their kids. And when a child, and many children do come in with issues that are passed down. And through the parents' healing of specific things, they heal specific things for their children. That's how it works. So if there is a curse or something like that, an attachment being passed down in a lineage, which you can access through your own emotional space, emotional energy, or mental energy, and you're able to alchemize that, then you've already started the ball rolling for the child. And if the child is having problems, you actually can, on behalf of the child, do that same alchemical work. And you can change everything about a child's life by doing so. In the same breath, as a parent, you're responsible for holding your kids accountable to learning what you can also do. So one of the things that we see occurring is that the children are just not held accountable to being disciplined. And this is especially the case in families where one of the parents is disciplined in this way, is disciplined in accountability, and the other parent is not disciplined in accountability. And so there's a major disconnect between that. and even a power struggle, it's very difficult to then hold the child to the same accountability, because they're looking at one of their parents within that dynamic that doesn't give credit to that type of accountability at all. And that's a very unhealthy dynamic, right? So adults need to be disciplined, and children also need to be taught discipline. And we don't mean discipline in a way of like, oh, spank your kid when they're bad. We mean, oh, you're having a meltdown right now? Let's sit here and let's walk through how we deal with a meltdown. Let me help you alchemize that energy, and through me alchemizing it, I will also teach you how you handle a panic attack, or how you handle being in an extreme state of fear. But what's happened is that adults are in avoidance of this type of energy and try to act like it doesn't exist, and instead use different types of distractions to give themselves reprieve from whatever their emotional state is that they're not wanting to pay attention to, and then pass down the art of distraction to their children. And it's getting worse and worse. The art of distraction is worse now than ever. And the children, instead of being held accountable to staying in an aware and centered space and dealing with whatever it is that they're dealing with, are being given medications and all this stuff, and iPads and video games and whatever else, to become even greater in the art of distraction and less capable in the art of presence. And it's the adult's fault that that's happening. And you can take that back generation, because without the adults actually practicing it, the kids won't learn it anyway. You can't be an adult who is not practicing presence and then tell your kid to practice presence. They're going to be like, screw you, right? So it's a very good question, a very important question. And, you know, one of the main things that we want everyone to understand is that in this energy of being truly accountable, and in the energy of being able to handle whatever is going on within oneself, and being able to transform energy within oneself, attachments cannot survive that. Attachments are parasitic energies. And by parasitic, that means they literally are feeding off of something. And what they're feeding off of is pain. So if one knows how to alchemize their own pain, if one is holding themselves accountable to alchemizing their own pain, then the attachments cannot exist in that environment. But when someone is addicted to their own pain, or someone is in that victim space of needing to constantly, they're getting something out of whatever the pain is, or needing to be in a state of blame, or needing to keep the secrets, or needing, or needing to be self-centered. That's another one too. This need to constantly be obsessed with the self. That all generates a very specific type of energy which feeds parasitic entities. They literally will leave your space, or you'll alchemize them. They are energy. If you are truly accountable for what's going on internally. This is why the story of downloading the memories and then coming to a space of forgiveness and everything became clear is such an accurate and great story, because It was the alchemy that changed the situation. The pain of the memory couldn't exist anymore within the state of forgiveness. So it's all energy, and you are energetic beings that actually have power in the process of alchemizing a thing. So, Mary, what was your question?
Hi, yeah. I don't know. You kind of answered it when you were talking about parents and I don't know, their need to handle their own emotions before they could expect their kids to, and then the distractions which come in and really are handed to them on silver platters with these, the cell phones and the laptops that they have to use in school. It's incredible that anyone can learn anything or communicate with their kids at all anymore. But I guess I had a question about the energy of honesty versus someone who is dishonest and who has learned to kind of slide through life by being dishonest. I mean, aren't those two energies kind of like repellent to each other? And then, so there's a conflict there where, the dishonest person doesn't want to listen to an honest person, what they have to say. And then the same is true for the honest person. And so as far as alchemizing that, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure that you've mentioned it during this talk so far on how like an honest, accountable parent can break through to their, say, dishonest and irresponsible child, like with the energy that just has been allowed to foster and fester. But maybe you could speak about that directly again.
Well, in regard to a child that you're perceiving to be dishonest or dysfunctional in general, remember the perception also needs to be kind of put in its own little category. Like, this is how I perceive this, right? So if you perceive someone being dishonest with you, then even that is a space of reflection of, is there something about me that is creating a space for this person to feel like they must be dishonest with me? And if you come up short, like, I don't know, then ask. I think it is actually your most true self to be very honest. And I also perceive that you have a difficult time being honest with me. What is it about me that makes it difficult for you to be honest with me? That's a good conversation starter. And most teenagers, especially, will, even if they don't say anything in that moment, will appreciate the question, because it is often in our responses to each other or our reactions to each other where we give someone the message of, it's not safe for you to be honest with me. So it is important always to also hold oneself in a state of observing self, and in order to be able to assess, in what way are my responses and my reactions pushing this person away? And if you come up short, it's a good place to start a conversation. that's where we would start with that.
Angel,
Yes.
You said to alchemize situations. How do you do that? Or is that your class?
Yeah, that is a deeper skill,
Okay.
but one that we definitely do teach in class. And
Okay.
it is very, very, very effective. What we will preface that with, though, is it takes a lot of love and energy to be able to do that, which, yes, Annalie, the other part that we want to speak about in regard to attachments, and this is some of the ways that attachments occur is through what we're receptive to. Okay, so in this world, there's a lot actually that's intended to create a link or doorway or connection to that which is parasitic. Different movies, different songs, different interactions with people. It really just goes on and on and on. And there are, in the Chinese philosophy, there's something called the Wei Qi, which is that protective barrier, that protective energetic barrier that's outside your body. And of course, in the West, this really isn't talked about at all. It's not given any attention that there's anything that exists outside of your body. But in fact, there is energy that exists outside of your body. And there are different ways to strengthen that energy. Everything we've been talking about today, about accountability and honesty and being in a place of genuine alignment and genuine authenticity, strengthens that energetic field. And in addition to being mindful of what you allow in through your myriad of senses, meaning be intentional with what you interact with in regard to thought, in regard to entertainment, and all of those things, because everything that exists is in some realm of frequency. And when you create sympathetic resonance, you create doors. It's not, like we said, it's not even a door, it just is. And so this ability to create this strong force field is very important. And there are some ways to do that are beyond what we've said. Like Master Owen Wei created a Qigong form called Ponggu Shenggong, which is extremely effective in strengthening the Wei Qi. And the Tai Chi form that was formed with him also, Ponggu Tai Chi, also very good at strengthening that Wei Qi. And what happens is when you have that strong field, your ability to discern that which is life-giving and that which is life-taking is exponentially increased. So when you put together the ability to be genuinely honest, when you're genuinely honest, it's really, really hard to manipulate. It's really, really hard to be manipulated when you're genuinely honest. Because if you can be honest with your own intentions, then it's really hard to move you. where it gets tricky is lying to yourself about your own intentions and the need to be of some kind of high moral standard or something. And in fact, there are many attachments that get through that door of lying to self about how good self is. Okay, so what we mean by that is someone is actually a self-centered individual, and they've convinced themselves that they're very life-giving and very lovely to others and all of that stuff, and it's complete nonsense. It's a total story, that kind of thing. That's an extreme version. Leah, did you have a question?
Yes. Before you were speaking about your experience in transmuting the girl's pain. Can we do that for someone who we have a close connection with, even when we don't know what their trauma is?
Well, in the way of what occurred in that specific thing of the download of those memories, there was no one that could have done that for me. But I did have someone who walked through it with me.
Okay.
And that's really important to understand too. And it also goes to Annalee's question of, you know, when someone you care about is suffering, you can help alchemize something with them. But ultimately, they still have to do it themselves also.
Sure.
Which is why we're saying, you know, in Annalee's situation, be with the child when you're doing that so that they also gain awareness and ability. And same to you, Leah. Be with the person so they gain awareness and ability, because whatever's calling it inside them has to be addressed with their understanding to keep it from happening again, or to keep it from repeating. Okay, we're going to give you an example of this, a very extreme example. We had a student who had a very, very traumatizing childhood. And in that childhood was a lot of abuse. And in fact, that whole unfolding was a continuation of abuse that had existed in other lives, which we know from feeling into this person's fields, where there was abuse and black magic. Okay, so black magic or dark magic is the use of the ability to interact with energy in a way that is intentionally harmful, sometimes unintentionally harmful, but usually intentionally harmful and manipulative. So essentially, evil is to use something or someone for one's own gain, right? So to sacrifice the well-being of another for one's own gain. That's evil. That's essentially the definition of evil. And that's also what dark magic is. And this student had lifetimes of this, which had created a massive attachment issue in field 2. That energy came forth to play in this life in that person's childhood. And see, this is the kind of thing that isn't discussed with people, that it does matter what exists in other lives. It comes to play. If it hasn't been alchemized, it comes to play in this life too. And so in this life, through the abuse, this energy came to play and created massive, massive dysfunction in this individual. Mental dysfunction, severe, severe mental dysfunction. So in the psychiatric world, it would be known as a mental illness, a very severe mental illness. And when we worked with this individual actually had a very beautiful beginning unfolding of a redemption process, in which the things that this individual had done in their life that were quite heinous were being expressed and relieved. And we got this massive parasitic entity off of this individual. And this entity had specifically come from another dimension. Not all of them exist in the way that this one was. But as we had it off of our student, and we asked our student, "Are you ready to let it go completely?" The student said, "No, I don't know who I am without that darkness," and called it back. And in that decision, the student quit class and went deeper into their own mental dysfunction, mental illness, because of the awareness. Before, it was not in awareness. Before, the knowledge of this relationship with this parasite was not at the forefront. It was subconscious. It was not interacting with the outward will of the individual. After that experience, it was interacting with the will of the individual. And so that individual's life got even worse. Now, imagine that had gone the other way, where we had walked this individual through the absolute release of that parasitic attachment. The individual would have actually healed their mental illness through their redemption process, through their choice to engage with that which is life-giving, and through their skill that they were learning of how to alchemize the pain in their childhood. And that individual would have become a beautifully remarkable healer and person. That was one of the paths. And the reason that we're telling that story is to really emphasize the importance of personal choice in a healing process. Because if the healing process is going on and they don't understand how it's happening, they can call back to themselves the same darkness that you or we help them to be free of. So it's very important to understand how we generate pain and how we alchemize pain in order to keep ourselves upright and in a continual process of purification. Because purification, alchemizing pain is a process of purification. We're calling it energetic alchemy or emotional alchemy, but it's a purification process. It's the ability to purify one's energy. And if one doesn't know how to do that on their own, then they are always susceptible to all of it, to everything we've been talking about. And, you know, one of the reasons also, back to the Wei Qi, that we want you guys to understand the importance of comprehending the complexity of a human being is that you are manipulated into pain, or you're manipulated into dysfunction and everything that goes along with that, of which attachments are one, through your lack of knowledge and through your lack of willingness to interact with your own energy and the energy around you. And this idea is actually manipulated. Okay, so let's take in your world right now, the pharmaceutical industry is very, very good at doing this. The pharmaceutical industry would like for everyone to believe that your health, whether it's physical health or mental health, emotional health, they don't even really recognize the other healths, but those are able to be adjusted through petrochemicals, right? Well, what is missing from that understanding? In order for a human being to interact with petrochemicals, what is not being considered? The Wei Qi, the energy of the human being, that which protects you before you even get to your body. So when you take a pill or when you inject a thing, you're bypassing every single bit of the energetic structure that was handed to you or gifted to you by the great creator or by the energy of life itself, however you want to think about that, so that you are then taking in a thing of unknown origin. And consider what so many pharmaceuticals have, well, they all have as a part of them, side effects, right? So by taking a thing to eliminate something, you get a whole onslaught of other things. So in the world of energetics, what is that? It's a pain cycle. And that's really, really important to understand, because when humanity finally realizes that that entire process is a manipulation process to make you think that there isn't a lot of things about you that you can strengthen through methods that don't even have anything to do with form to keep you from getting ill, when that's not considered, then you are able to take into you, without knowledge, without understanding, that which you might not be in favor of. Meaning, through your lack of comprehension and your lack of exploration and your lack of alchemizing and interacting with the energy within you and the energy between you and others, but wanting a shortcut, you invite into you that which is harmful. And consent is a thing. So to consider always, what am I consenting to in any interaction, in anything that you're putting into your body, in anything that you're listening to, in any conversation that you engage with. What am I consenting through is another level of honesty that will give you a lot of answers when you're trying to figure out how to be on a purification path, or how to be on an accountability path. Because when you consider that consent and accountability are very important to one another, right? In accountability, if you ask yourself, what have I consented to? You will have some profound answers as to why different things in your life have gone askew. And of course, in that question, and then in the answers that come from that question, you have the next level of, this is what I do about it, which then you can engage with those, right? Do you guys understand what we're saying by this? Have we missed any questions? Yes, our class on alchemy, we're going to launch that soon. We're going to launch a class that's about energetic alchemy and the 8 fields. Class. We've never done it that way before, but that's what the next one is going to be, and we'll send out an email about that. Well, this recording does have an explanation of the different fields in it. We would say if you want to go deeper into the 8 fields, take the next class. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions before we go into the final part? Do you guys feel like you're having a little bit more of an understanding of what attachments are? Or at least how they come to exist within a person's body and field? Okay, good. I'll tell you one more story about a different type of an attachment. So we had a student who was very abused as a child. So you're seeing a theme, right? Abuse. Good way to create that doorway or that resonance. So this person was sexually abused as a child, and it had fragmented them in field 7, meaning, and pretty much everyone has fragmented self in the perception field or the ego, like how many versions of me are there kind of thing. But when there's abuse, it's a lot more. Yeah, exactly, Randy. When it's abuse, there's a lot more of that fragmentation that occurs. So this individual had a specific version. So what happens when there's trauma at a young age is that almost always when there's trauma at a young age, what goes along with that is the inability to know how to deal with the emotions that are occurring there, right? Hence, they wouldn't be in that situation if they were actually surrounded by adults who knew how to handle that. And usually the adults are the one doing the abusing. So this individual was sexually abused and then, of course, didn't know what to do with that. And so there were many aspects of this individual that were stunted or frozen in time, which is what happens with children who are abused. And another part of the self goes, we're just going to put this version of me that's abused right here, and then we're going to create a new version of me that's going to go to school tomorrow and be okay. And so there ends up being all these children that exist within the person that are stuck in time. And this is actually what happens to everyone in one way or another, which is why the energetic alchemy is so important, which is why being able to interact with the emotional energy is so crucial and essential, because none of you had the most pristine childhoods, and none of you live in a world that is extremely life-giving in regard to relationships. So one of these versions that was in field 7 was, and it wasn't just field 7, this was a soul aspect existing in field 7. But it was so abused and so beaten and diminished and deprived that it had become that energy itself. It was the energy of deprivation. It was the energy of abuse. It was the energy of defiled. And what we were trying to teach this individual was how to parent these aspects so that they could be integrated. But this person had never been a parent. So within their experience, they did not even know how to begin to parent an aspect of themselves when they had never even been a parent. Meaning that love that someone can call upon within themselves that they feel for their own child, which could have been shared with one of these little children within themselves, couldn't, because that experience didn't even exist within this person. And unless this aspect was rehabilitated, meaning unless this aspect was given a parental nurturing love on a continual basis, it was not going to be able to be integrated. Okay, so this is an attachment that's not, it is, but it isn't, meaning it's an attachment, it's parasitic in its expression of how it's existing, which we just described, but it doesn't come from somewhere else. It came from within the person. But it's an aspect of self feeding off of the life force that exists within the person. It's a split. And in order to integrate the split, the individual would have had to have been able to parent with a great amount of love this split aspect. And this individual was not able to do that. So what we did is we called it into our body. And we, while nursing origin, also gave love to this aspect for months, every day. Every time we were nursing origin, we were nursing this aspect. Every time we were holding him, we were holding this aspect. And this aspect changed from a black, tar-like, deprived, parasitic essence into the essence of a healthy child. But it wasn't without tremendous difficulty, because it felt like my chest was being squeezed to death. It was actually very scary at first. But through this process of loving this aspect, it grew into a child. And then we were able to give it back to the student a few months later. And when we gave it back, it set off a chain reaction within her to integrate and heal further. Meaning, when it went into her body, she felt it and immediately broke down sobbing because she could feel what it was like to be loved. So that's another example of an attachment. And an example of an attachment that would not leave is the one that we gave you earlier with the student. We also had another client that had an attachment that was making this individual very, 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 very sick, physically sick. But this individual is so convinced of their own goodness, even though it's very clear that everyone they interact with doesn't like them and feels like they're draining. That they can't heal it within themselves. They can't let go of the attachment within themselves because they're continuing to feed it through self-centeredness. So this is what we mean by being accountable. Are you guys starting to comprehend? And so even in the spirit of narcissism, sure, yeah, you could call it that. Self-hate, absolutely. Self-hate is absolutely an energy that is going to be resonating with things that you don't want. And this is the thing, when it comes to something like self-hate, there is a process of how to interact with that energy, where, so to interact with self-hate is to first understand where it's coming from, and to be able to interact with self in a way that says, I'm sorry. Because self-hate means that you behaved in some kind of way, or are behaving in some kind of way that's making you not like yourself, or there was something that happened which made you not like yourself, which means that there's a split, and the aspect of you that doesn't like you needs to be heard, needs to be understood. And so it's the other aspect of you going, how did I hurt you? And then that aspect being able to go, by doing this, and then being able to go, I'm so sorry. If we're going to put it to words, that's how that would unfold. It'd still be a sort of redemption process. Now, sometimes self-hatred is occurring from abuse, because when the abuse occurred, the person internalized the abuse as their own fault. And in that situation, there's a very different unfolding for how to deal with the energy of self-hatred. See, these are very complex topics and complex energies. So there isn't a one size fits all for this kind of thing, but there always is the ability to deeply interact with the energy itself in a very honest way, being accountable for being a part of a transformation process. Yeah. And there was more questions in here about a child with autism and being present with child with autism. And then another question about affirmations. Affirmations, same thing as what we've said about speaking anything. If you wake up every day and you say, I'm so happy to be alive. I am strong, powerful, and capable of anything. And you don't mean a single word of that, then that affirmation is shit. You just lied to yourself and called it healing. The better thing to do is to figure out what you actually think is true. Like, get closer to what's actually real for you. So if you're in a very depressed state and you want an affirmation, then find something that is believable to you. I know I'm capable of experiencing positive emotion. And today, I'm willing to move toward that. That's an actual affirmation. That's not a lie to yourself. Unless you say it and you go, I felt like in that whole willingness thing, that wasn't actually accurate. So then you change it, tweak it again. See, this is where honesty comes into play. So that you're holding yourself accountable in every moment to, am I being real with myself? If you're going through a horrible time in life, then affirmations that are supposed to take you from way down in the dumps to some kind of exalted space are a quantum leap of nonsense. If you're in a seriously sad place, then figure out what is the next level of that. And we call this the same thing, whether it's affirmation or prayer, we call it intelligent prayer, but it's learning to communicate with the great creator of life in a way that is actually genuine. So if you wake up and you feel like you don't want to live another day, then your intelligent prayer or your affirmation is more something like, please help me believe in my own capability to see beauty. Or I believe I'm capable of seeing beauty. Please help me to know and to experience the receptivity of the great love that's here for me. And help me know I'm capable of doing that. Like, go into it and understand where the pain is, what's happening with it, and what the prayer is about it, or what the affirmation is about it. And as far as children that already have attention deficit or that have autism, you know, you guys are once again in a really quite a toxic soup here, with all of the things, all of the constant input that is damaging, whether it's environmental or, you know, entertainment, or through your food, or through the petrochemicals, or whatever. The strengthening of that Wei Qi is so important. And the children can also engage in practices that strengthen their Wei Qi. In addition, even children with ADHD and children with autism can be taught presence, and a parent can practice presence with them. And there are different methods of practicing presence. It's more difficult with children with ADHD or autism. But when you start looking at the child through the lens of energy, instead of just the lens of a physical manifestation, then there's a lot more ways to interact with them. And in the way that we are discussing, you know, alchemizing on behalf of others, like what Anna Lee asked about, you know, being able to alchemize on behalf of the child. A child with autism or ADHD, parents can absolutely learn how to alchemize energy on their behalf. And in fact, life is asking the parents of children who have attention deficit and children who have autism to become stronger in those ways to help them. And if we continually ask ourselves, instead of the question, why did this happen to me? But the question of, how can I more powerfully interact with that which has happened to me? Answers begin to come. Things begin to look different. Because there is always a path of greater authority or greater power or greater ability within a situation. Always. But within the victim mindset, there's nothing. There's no way to improve anything. There's no way to solve anything. And it's not true. There is always a way to interact and solve. And there are always ways to strengthen one's own ability to be healthy, and also ways to help a child be healthier. So one of our main messages for struggling parents with struggling children is to expand your mindset on what can help, and to hold oneself more accountable to becoming more capable and able to interact with energy in a very strong way, and to be consistent in doing so. You're welcome. So do you guys have any questions?
Angel,
Mm-hmm.
so basically, let's say like if one is unable right now maybe to take your classes and stuff, and one wants to deal with this, being more honest, do you think maybe like journal writing would help one? Because I know in the past when I used to write a journal, it would help me to be more in touch with my feelings and why I would do things, and even to understand others. And somehow it would lift me out of whatever I was going through. Because like you say, I've always believed too, I'm very, I've always, it's kind of me, I mean, to an extreme sometimes. I've always worked on being honest and looking at my emotions and not running away from them. But like journaling seemed to help to be able to bring me to a higher state. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure, journaling is great. The biggest thing to remember in the practice of honesty is that honesty is actually a two-way street. So there's the honesty that is an outward expression, and then there's an honesty which is a receptivity expression. So you want to be analyzing yourself consistently with not only can I deliver honesty, but can I receive it? And when I receive it, can I self-correct without lashing out? So can I self-correct?
Or without just feeling hurt like endlessly, right?
Well, and if you feel hurt, it's okay. So use the same practice even in that. Like I'm hurt with the honesty, but okay, I'm not going to use that hurt to lash out. Meaning I'm going to pay attention to ending a cycle instead of feeding a cycle. So when you give me your pain, then I'm going to, because I love you, I'm going to take it in and I'm going to feel it and hear it. And I'm going to correct myself accordingly. And whatever pain I feel from the way in which you said it to me, or the way in which the energy with which you emitted it to me, I'm just going to be with that, and I'm going to be with me experiencing it. I'm not going to hold you accountable for it, not for a moment, for a minute. I'm going to just experience all of it within me, so that I can slow myself down.
Like an observer.
Not only an observer, that's part of the equation, but the other aspect of it is the you that feels it.
Right.
Because you don't want to disconnect yourself from that entirely. Or, then you're just analyzing what's going on. You're not actually alchemizing anything. You can't alchemize anything if you don't feel it.
Right.
So you want to be able to feel it, but you want to hold yourself accountable to not feeding the blame and lashing out cycle. And sometimes to stop feeding that cycle, you stop talking to the person, but you do it in a way that's loving. You don't punish them. You don't stop talking to someone to punish them. You stop talking to them to end a cycle. Do you guys understand the difference of that?
Yes, I've experienced that. I've had to do that very often. Yes. Yeah, because I don't like walking around being angry and resentful. And even though that's being dished out at me, so yeah, I'm able to. I know what you mean. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, you guys, it has been 2 hours, and we hope that you feel that you have a better understanding of how these dynamics occur, and that you feel more empowered within yourselves to be able to be firm in your own expression of accountability and your interaction with all of the different energies within you and all around you.
Thank you. I've learned a lot. I see what I have to put into practice too.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you so much, Angel.
Thank you, Amanda.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night. That was amazing.
Good night, Leah. Thank you. We'll send you guys a recording of this too, okay?
Thank you, Angel. I enjoyed this.
You're welcome, Portia. Good night, everyone.